Okay.
Sorry, I was
Collapsed.
kind of looking for everybody to.
This is the March 17th, 2014 meeting of the Sammamish City Council. It's a regular meeting. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mayor Tom Vance.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Councilmember Bates. Here. Councilmember Don Jarrett.
Here.
Councilmember Bob Keller.
Here.
Councilmember Tom Odell. Councilmember Ramiro Valderrama.
Present.
Councilmember Nancy Whitten.
It is my pleasure to be here on St. Patty's Day.
Hey.
Where would you rather be?
Ireland.
Councilmember Odell
Bye.
has asked to be excused. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Councilmember Odell is excused. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Wait, discussion. I have a point before we go through that. I understood that there was going to be an addition, first of the GIS being pulled out from the consent agenda.
That's the consent agenda.
Understand. And also that there was a request as far as looking at land conservation. Will that be added?
It's in the, that'll be later.
Okay.
It's on the agenda, but,
All right.
okay,
I have to go and get my glasses.
fine. All in favor of approving the agenda then?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. No student liaison reports. We do have a presentation. Mr. City Manager.
Oh, Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, did we do the pledge? No, we didn't. Let's stop and do the pledge. Councilmember Valderrama, will you lead us?
Please rise and join me in saying your Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now presentations and proclamations. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as you know, Cameron has been hired as the new city manager in Berrien. My congratulations to him and my condolences to us. When someone's done as much heavy lifting as Cameron has over the past 9 years and done it with such a flair and a deeply grounded competence, it's always going to be challenged to fill his shoes. Nevertheless, we will give our best. We will start the recruitment process within the next few days, and we hope that we'll try to find somebody to fill Cameron's shoes. That's going to be tough. His job here came with lots of responsibilities and lots of opportunities to upset people. As a community development director, that's one of the tasks. But I have to tell you, in my career, few have ever handled it with as much grace and as a professionalism as Cameron did. He's been a terrific community development director for us. He's been a terrific assistant city manager for me. And Cameron, I want to thank you for the services that you provided to our community. And we wish you very best in your new job. I know you're going to do a fantastic job for City of Berrien. So we have something to present to you, so if you want to come over here for a second, please. Now, don't get excited. This is not for you. This is for Tina.
Thank you very much.
All the night meetings, all the community meetings that you attended while she's waiting for you at the dinner table. So please extend our sincere thanks and appreciation to her.
Thank you for thinking of Tina. I sure appreciate it.
And then we do have a little plaque for you. It says, presented to Cameron Grell in grateful appreciation for outstanding dedication and service as Assistant City Manager and a Director of Community Development to the City of Sammamish and its citizens from April 2005 to March 2014.
Wow, thank you very much. That is really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's really, really kind. Thank you so much.
That's my presentation. I know you may have a few things to say. I'm talking about the good things that you say to me.
Well, I would just say that I've worked with Cameron since almost the first day he was here, maybe a year or so later, in the Planning Commission, and through a whole lot of interesting topics that we went through, and then now, of course, on the council, and I'm really, I'm sorry to see you go, but I know it's well-deserved, and it's about time, kind of, you know, so. In a way. Anyone else want to say? Yes.
I remember when Cameron first came on as a consultant back in 2005 to do the best science report for the critical areas ordinance. And it was a pleasure to work with him as a consultant. And then we were fortunate enough to be able to retain him. And it's been a wonderful 9 years. And he's one of the most professional people I know and has demonstrated his professionalism, expertise, and leadership. And so I just wish him the very best.
Don?
Well, I think he got the job because I wasn't a reference for it. No, really, it's just been a real pleasure working with you. I guess thinking back, there's only one really troublesome thing that stands out, that you never answered the question that I asked, which wildlife are we concerned about in the wildlife corridors?
That will haunt you tonight.
Thank you, Cameron.
Yes, it was such a pleasure to work with you. I worked with you from the time you first came, and I was really looking forward to going through the comprehensive plan with you again. But I had a feeling that we might not have that opportunity, because it certainly was time for you to move on, and I think Burien is extremely lucky to get you. And I will tease Nancy every time I see her about you stealing us.
You want to?
You want to go first? All right. No, I want to thank you for the 9 years of services. I think that they've covered most of the points here. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and we wish you Godspeed.
I have to second what Tom Vance was saying, in that I had the opportunity to work with you, Cameron, on the Planning Commission. And I have to tell you, that was very educational for me. You were working with a pretty very disparate group of people into long evenings, and educated everybody and brought us through meeting the deadlines that we needed to meet. So I'm very happy for Burien. They're getting somebody that can do the job for them. I'm really happy for you with your progression in your career, and sad that I don't get to work with you on the city council. So good luck.
Just a couple of quick comments. First, thank you very much. The plaque and the flowers are very generous, and they mean a lot to me, and I really appreciate it. I will keep that plaque forever. I want to extend my thanks first to the community here in Sammamish. Sammamish is blessed with horsepower of all sorts, from intellectual horsepower, financial horsepower, and mostly people that really care about this community. And so we've had the blessing of lots of people who've wanted to serve on commissions and participate in processes that we've been lucky enough to help run. And we've benefited from all that input. This is a community that really cares about the city, and it's been remarkable to me that whenever we've asked for help, that help has been generously offered. Oftentimes, very frequently, but it's really been wonderful. Second, let me thank this council and councils previous and planning commissions. The leadership and policy direction that you all have shown has inspired me as a public servant. I feel confident that your thoughtful, careful, and wise stewardship of our resources and approach to policy decision-making helps us make great decisions here. And part of my goal is to help any place I work be a little bit better than when I came there. This council, the councils I've worked with, and the planning commissions have doubled on that bet, and it's really been remarkable to see your progress and results of that. Let me also thank my staff. Susan is here right now, my very able deputy, who has really been wonderful to work with, and all the people that she supervises. Robin's in the back of the room, and there are many more people in community development. And all of our colleagues in Public Works, Parks, and other places have made our work that much better. There's a great team dynamic here. And then finally, I'll say that's because we have a fabulous city manager in Ben Uzici. I've learned so much from him. He's been a mentor and a friend, and a guiding light for all of us here. And you're fortunate to have him making the decision for your next community development director. And I wish you all the very, very best in that process. I will watch with interest as Sammamish continues its progress. And thank you for the great send-off. I really, really appreciate it.
Okay, public comment is next. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council, 3 minutes limit per person, or 5 minutes if representing the official position of a recognized community organization. Please give your name and address. I have Mary Martin first.
Hello, and thank you. I'm Mary Martin. I live at 5101 East Lake Sammamish Parkway, Northeast in Sammamish. I'm here as a resident and also representing Habitat for Humanity, Seattle-King County. And I want to, I'm here, like I said, as a representative of Habitat. I have been a donor, a volunteer, and now for the last 10 years on staff with Habitat for Humanity, currently as the grants director. And I want to thank you for participating in ARCH, a regional coalition for housing. Habitat for Humanity has benefited significantly from the support of ARCH, helping us to create the Habitat neighborhoods of Patterson Park in Redmond, Coal Creek Terrace in Newcastle, Magnolia Village in Issaquah, all in all, helping to create almost 50 affordable homes in East King County. And I appreciate your understanding of how difficult it is for a low-income family to purchase a home in Sammamish. The prices have risen again. We're up to, I think, $575 for the median home in East King County. And with your donation of the property donated to Habitat, certainly represents your understanding of the need for affordable housing in Sammamish. And we are very grateful for that and look forward to developing that property and building 10 single-family affordable homes on that property in the next couple of years. Thank you again for participating in ARCH through that and for considering their budget and suggestions, proposals for you tonight. Thank you again.
Thank you. Next is Joel Timmerman.
Hi. I'm Joel Timmerman, 69711 Pine Street in Sisters, Oregon, 97759. I'm here tonight to ask the council help in authorizing the staff to include the R1 study in the comprehensive plan update, or as a minimum, at least to have the staff determine the criteria for changing R1 zoning to R4 or R6. The state mandate in the Growth Management Act requires property within the urban growth areas to be developed to their full potential to avoid urban sprawl. The city of Sammamish adopted the R1 zoning from King County without review or consideration of properties meeting the Growth Management Act. Our property, zoned R1, is in the urban growth area of the city, east of 244th off of Northeast 18th Street, and abuts property currently zoned R4 to the south and west. And as a footnote, our property has less environmental issues than those R4 zone properties contiguous to our property. The R1 study would best serve the public interest by addressing the issues in the comprehensive plan update process rather than taking a piecemeal approach by individual property owners through the docket process on a site-by-site review. Several R1 zone property owners have already made zoning change requests through the docket process, which have been put on hold pending the R1 study in the comprehensive plan update. The city has been given the responsibility to comply with the growth management in preventing urban sprawl by properly zoning property within the urban growth boundaries. This has not been accomplished with the R1 zone properties, and the comprehensive plan update study for the R1 zone properties affords the city with this opportunity for compliance. As a minimum, the city should develop the criteria for changing R1 zone properties to R4, R6. This would allow staff to filter through those properties in advising property owners in their docket process if by chance the city does not resolve the issue in the comprehensive plan update. We have lived on this property for over 30 years before the city was incorporated. Now our property utilizes portions of the city's infrastructure daily. The property owners in the unincorporated portion of the city within the urban growth boundaries are supporting the businesses within the city. We seek your help in the comprehensive plan update that would properly address this issue, making our neighborhood conform with the city's future plans.
Could you try to wrap up?
Thank you.
Okay.
And in closing, I would also like to thank Cameron for his help in professionalism he afforded me in my contact with the city. Thanks.
Thank you. Gregory Kipp?
Good evening, council members. My name is Gregory Kipp, address 3011 211th Avenue Northeast in Sammamish. I too am here to urge the council to include the R1 study in the 2015 comprehensive plan rewrite. I began working on getting some relief for R1 property owners as part of the ECA update process in 2012. I think, as many of you know, the city of Sammamish has some of the most stringent regulations for R1 property owners of any jurisdiction in King County. Not only is there the 50% set aside for open space, there's also the requirement that all critical areas be deducted from any net density calculation. Beginning in 2012, with the ECA update process, had lengthy discussions with the Planning Commission, and it was determined at that time that the issue ought to be addressed in the 2013 comprehensive plan update process. So after that year in 2012, moved to 2013 through the comprehensive plan update. At the conclusion of that year's process, it was decided by the City Council that the R1 issue ought to be deferred to the 2015 comprehensive plan rewrite, which is what is before you this evening. So I urge the council to continue with that effort, to stay with the commitment that they made during that decision last year and include the R1 study in the 2015 comprehensive plan rewrite. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Paul Stickney.
Before Mr. Stigney talks, and Paul, I owe you a phone call, so I apologize for not getting back to you. It's been intensely busy.
No, that's okay, Ben.
I apologize for that one, so I will call you tomorrow.
And one question for the council, and I got to apologize for the raspy voice. John Hansen's out of town, and Richard Berg is recovering from surgery. We had a couple things to say tonight. Would it be possible to get 5 minutes, or should I put it into 3?
But you can, if you're speaking for the group.
Yeah, I am speaking for the group. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I am Paul Stickney at 504 228th Avenue Southeast in Sammamish, and speaking for Richard Berg, John Hansen, Doug Ramsey, and myself. Have handed out 2 sheets to the council tonight written. The first one I'd like to chat about concisely is we'd like to suggest that you do include in your, budgeting for the comp plan, making holistic change to the town center. And we'd like to suggest that this becomes a top priority, similar to the homeless encampment for a speed timeline. Reason for that can be summarized in the top paragraph. We feel that the changes can be made to the town center to make it workable that will preserve the environmental standards and not change anything there, not increase traffic or car trips, and maintain small-town character of Sammamish. Have had the opportunity to meet with you one-on-one over the last couple months and have given information over time. This sheet is sort of a recap, a solution, and a request. So rather than read through it, we feel honestly and are quite excited that we may have a great solution for the city to make the town center workable, maintain the environmental quality, not increase traffic, and to keep the character of the city. Next piece of paper is what we are calling the why for this. Why do holistic change to town center, and why do it quickly? This is called 5 weighted beneficial orbits, and I can't believe I spit it out to be. It's unreal. This is, and you can thank Dick Berg for the great graphic on this. He's got the city of Sammamish in the middle as a sun, and we think there are 5 beneficial reasons to put town center holistic change, do it quickly, have those changes make the town center workable, and have those changes to town center influence comp plan 2035. The least important of the 5, with the smallest orbit, is to bring land value in the town center, which is now selling for less than R4 prices in the city, to a point similar to commercial property land values in Sammamish Highlands and the Pine Lake. So we're looking for numbers outside of what's in the area, but the current plan has got land values set at a point under R4. Next larger orbit is the city of Sammamish itself. We called town center property value Mercury, and the city of Sammamish Venus. The envisioned mixed-use town center plan would become a reality for the city. There would be economic diversification and income to the city, and it would be a heart of the city, which the city has for a goal. The third larger orbit of Earth is what we're calling transportation and health. lessen car use, to promote health from mixed use, multimodal reality parks, trails. Mars, which Dick had as yellow, and I made him change to red because I said Don would catch this. So, I said that, so the citizens of Sammamish are in the Mars orbit, the larger orbit, to have the citizens get smaller housing options, because today most of the housing in Sammamish is large housing, some more white-collar jobs, appropriate amount, and not a huge change, some, boutique services, and have a great social place to go. Last thing, the last orbit, Jupiter, we're calling that in environmental and sustainability. And these are comments that you can read, but in essence, they apply to the whole city. Compact, complete, connected, conserve natural resources, reduce sprawl, affordable senior housing, and have a sustainable community. We think these are all five great reasons for getting the town center workable and having it done quickly, and having those changes influence comp plan 2035. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Eileen Stahl?
Good evening. Eileen Stahl, 21553 Southeast 28th Lane in Sammamish. I'm here tonight representing Friends of Pine Lake, a volunteer organization.
Should we move the mic down or speak louder? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay. A volunteer organization formed in 1998. I think it's there because...
It's broken, huh?
Well,
We need that technology change.
we're here tonight to respectfully ask the council to set aside a permanent native easement on the parcel of land between the proposed community and aquatic center and wetland 61 on the lower commons. We feel it is important to protect this land in particular because it lies directly between the proposed community center and the sensitive wetland, and therefore will be most impacted during and after site development. It contains a steep forested slope with mature Douglas fir trees, and the wetland is habitat for a wide variety of wildlife. Although mitigation for the community center is planned elsewhere in the lower commons, and we applaud that reforestation, there is no mitigation currently proposed for this area directly below the community center. We have met with park staff and asked if it is possible for this land to be set aside and protected from future development. Though receptive to the idea, they told us that the decision must be made by the council. We would appreciate very much the council's consideration of this request. We noticed also on the agenda tonight the scoping issues regarding the update of the comprehensive plan. We have many concerns, as many do, about stormwater management in the city, especially the Thompson Basin. We encourage the city to make further use of on-the-ground monitoring data for Wetland 61, Wetland 17, and Ebright Creek. The city has been collecting some of this data for some time now, and as have we. When analyzed and compared to the data from the original basin plan, it will give us valuable information about actual stormwater flows and effects on the environment, and give the council additional insight in making important decisions for our future. And I wanted to thank Cameron myself. I knew Cameron way back when he worked for King County before we became a city. Going down there to DDES to check out the environmental stuff, and he was always very helpful. And it's been a pleasure to work with you all these years, and we will really miss you. Thank you. I've passed along to the council a schematic of the community center, and the piece of property that I'm talking about is highlighted in gold on that drawing.
And we have that, Eileen, thank you for giving that, and I'll share that with the council in executive session, the bigger version of it.
Section.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
The others haven't seen it yet.
Thank you. Next is John Bredl.
Yes, I'm John Bredl. I live at 1026 Lancaster Way. I'm the president of the Lancaster Ridge Homeowners Association, so Lancaster Ridge is just on the other side of the wetlands here. And I'm here to express solidarity and express our support for what Eileen just presented. Obviously, we're, the first ones down after the wetlands there. We've seen, since the building has been going on up here, we've seen an ever-increasing amount of water coming down through our neighborhood. The entrance into it after heavy rain sometimes actually has water over the road, so we're a little afraid we're going to become an island at some times. So anyway, we'd just like to express our solidarity with the proposal that Eileen was speaking about for the permanent native easement there for the aquatic center. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Paul Brenna, I believe.
Good evening. My name is Paul Brenna. I live at 2443 270th Avenue Southeast, Issaquah, 98029. Thank you for the time to talk to you tonight. I'm here to encourage the council, as we have done in the past, to include the Duthie Hill Notch, as it's known, area in the comprehensive plan update to be potentially considered as annexation to the city of Sammamish that's currently in unincorporated King County. Some of the council members, I'm sure, may remember the Duthie Hill Notch because it has been discussed here on more than one occasion. In fact, the city has been, I would say, enthusiastically supportive of annexing this notch for 9 years that I know of, and has in the past, with last cycle through the King County Comprehensive Plan Update, the city of Sammamish did a pretty extensive study and presentation of this area as to why it made sense to include it in the city of Sammamish. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a notch of property on Duthie Hill Road, about 40 some acres, with 20 parcels in it, that somehow was excluded from the city of Sammamish when the King County Comprehensive Plan Update for the Growth Management Act was enacted way back when. And everybody was mystified as to why the city of Sammamish boundaries notch around this site, and I think it still mystifies some people even in the city of Sammamish. One of the things that the city has voiced concern over is that section of Duthie Hill Road that fronts this notch is pretty much neglected by King County because it's city of Sammamish on both ends of it, and it's kind of become a no man's land for, I guess, logical reasons. The county thinks that Sammamish should take care of it, and so I think they have, but they don't get any income from property fronting on it because it's in King County. This would add, in today's dollars, about $10 million of assessed value to the city of Sammamish, which would help in some ways, I'm sure, with the tax base fund that. So anyway, I hope it's considered. I think we've done a little bit better job trying to inform the people in the notch as to why this makes sense. Cameron and his staff can provide you with reams of good reasons that were presented to King County. We did a recent poll, this is important, a recent poll of the property owners. In fact, it was just concluded yesterday, and 62.5% of the area in the notch, property owners are in favor of annexation, and 56% of the assessed value in the notch is in favor of annexation. So once again, I hope that this can be on the docket for comprehensive plan inclusion. And I think my buzzer went off, so I'm going to get out of here, but I can't do it without thanking Cameron. And this is a totally honest comment. One of the reasons that I would like to be in the city of Sammamish instead of King County is because of people like Cameron and the other city officials and staff that I've learned to know and admire over the last few years while we've been working on this notch question. It's just been a total pleasure. You're 15 minutes from my house versus Renton and Seattle, and I want to be part of the city. I want to have the local representation that is so professionally done here, and I've always admired. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Next is Victor Heller.
So my name is Victor Heller, live at 1415 208th Avenue Southeast. I'm here to urge the council to approve the R1 study for the 2015 comprehensive plan rewrite. My wife and I have been residents of the Plateau for over 30 years now. We've put significant effort into making what we could do to attempt to make development reasonable in many areas. We put significant resources into Cedar Cove, trying to make that, we reduced the density in there and also prevented a through road that would affect the neighborhoods. We also worked very hard for the crossings development to try to reduce the impact. We were unsuccessful there. Our property is adjacent to crossings, which is R6. We also have the elementary school across the boundary from our property as well. To the east, there are two smaller lots in two locations, so there's 4 properties that are fairly small relative to ours. And to the north, if we skip one property, there's significant development going on that's clustered just to the west of 212. So we believe the property could easily accommodate R4 and protect all environmentally critical areas, not only on our property, but on adjacent properties as well. Unfortunately, it was, we inherited the zoning from R1 from King County at the time the city was formed. Additionally, the burden of the current R1 zoning regulations, including the 50% set aside for open space, the loss of density credit for critical areas and buffers, they significantly limit our ability to obtain a fair and reasonable value for our property. Previous attempts to get some relief through the 2012 ECA update process and the 2013 comp plan update have been resulted in somewhat delays or kicking the can down the road. But each time it was deferred to a subsequent process. So most recently in December, the City Council deferred it to the 2015 comp plan. So this is an issue of fairness, I think, for property owners. We want to have reasonable development. The character of the city is changing, and we recognize that. But I urge the council to honor its decision and approve the study. Thank you.
Thank you. Also have, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Bob Brodigan. If that's wrong, please correct me at the microphone.
Okay, where's the clock that I watch for time? I'm not long-winded. I'm Bob Brodigam, and I live in the area designated at the Notch on 271st Avenue. The subject of annexation of our area, as Paul has explained, is not a new one. It's been through the county council several times. And in fact, the area has been in states of transition or consideration since it was forestry land. Back in, prior to 1978, it was zoned general with provisions for potential suburban residential or suburban estates, all which evolved into eventually becoming rural 5-acre plots at the time that the Trosax community was platted out in '93. Earlier this year, following the council meeting last year that gave direction on the study, we did make contact with Cameron and his staff to talk about some of the issues that might be involved in being annexed. And on our own, we undertook an effort to get the community together and talk about the concerns that citizens might have, the property owners might have, were we to be annexed to the city of Sammamish. We try to openly discuss the benefits of being within the city, and there are many, as well as the risks and concerns to the property owners. Those concerns generally reside in the individuals who wish to retain their property as is, with one house on nominally 1.5 acres, some small, a little bit smaller, and some a little bit larger. We had a meeting on that subject, but we were unable to come to any agreement on an overall plan or configuration for the notch that would both satisfy the needs of the people who wish to develop and also address the concerns of the people who wanted to preserve the environment that we have and their ability to stay in their homes on their properties. As you can see from the statistics, our neighborhood is divided. The preference for annexation has shifted with the transition of ownership of a significantly large plot, and another two individuals are potentially considering some development of their property. But there's still a lot of consternation within the community, especially in the part of those who don't want to be annexed, on what will happen to us should this issue proceed. And we fully understand that there's a long process to go through after this study and the recommendation to, study the area. We have to go through the county and then go back through the formal petitioning process. But there are some concerns that we have that we can't answer, and I'd suggest that they be included in this study. So the study addresses more than the benefits to the city of annexing our property. It also looks out after the concerns of the citizens in the area that might be annexed. The 3 or 4 major ones are the impact, the assessed property values of the land within the notch. If the zoning density is increased, the question is, will the value of our lands go up commensurately? We've attempted to get answers to that question from the county assessor to no avail. I would hope that the city has a little more influence on the assessor and might get that issue addressed. We're afraid that our tax bases will skyrocket, and despite the lower tax rates for the city, so will our taxes. Next is, as Paul has alluded to, upgrades to Duthie Hill Road. That road isn't maintained by the city, by the county as is. It's a dangerous road, very hazardous in the vicinity of our community. We would like to know what plans there are in the city of Sammamish to upgrade that road should it fall under the jurisdiction of the city. And what plans there are to look for alternate routes for traffic out of Trosax so we can alleviate the traffic load on Duthie Hill Road. It's heavily traveled at high speed, creating a hazard. Current options for development within this area would seem to dictate connecting stub roads from Trosax to High Country. That brings along some concern about the impact to adjoining properties. We would like to know if the city is able to put in any kind of noise protection and barriers to isolate and minimize the impact of that traffic on the current residents. There are environmentally sensitive areas with, pardon?
Could you try to sum up?
Yeah, I'm ready to right now. There are environmentally sensitive areas within the notch, and we might trust that the considerations of those environmental areas will be considered in this study. We're not trying to be obstructionist on this issue. We fully recognize the conflict between the right of people to develop their properties and the protection of things as they are for the owners who are not going to develop. After all, it is our neighbors who want to make a change. We just want to see that everything is considered, not just the cost and impacts to the city.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to give public comment tonight? Anyone else? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. What we were going to take off.
Well,
That's right, I did ask for item 4, contract GIS, on-call contract spatial development to be taken off the
Okay,
consent agenda.
Should I put, what, unfinished business maybe, or
We can put it under new business,
Business.
item
New
number
business.
9, Mr. Mayor, if that's possible. Thank you,
number
Mr.
9?
Mayor.
All right, we'll do that. Okay. The rest of the consent agenda includes expenses for the period ended March 17th. Includes our 2 annual resolutions regarding Arch and some minutes. That's basically it. So I have a motion and do I have well, I guess I'll start over. Do I have a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
All right.
Okay. All right. Let's go to new business, item 7, managing consultant AV systems replacement budget. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This item is before you. It's partly because some of the vacancies that I have in staffing here, the project is normally managed by the finance director and IT director, and for personal reasons that position is currently temporarily not filled. I thought that I could have this project to be done by our project manager, Sevda Baran, and then Sevda just actually had injured her leg, so she's got a fracture bone, so she's the commission. So I'm running a little bit thin here, so I need about a $16,000 allocation to get this consultant on board to complete this project. The description of the project is pretty much consists of updating our AV system and video system here in the chamber, council chamber room, and also consists of upgrading our emergency operations center, which is the executive briefing room. Sevda is doing fine, so that she will be back here. Actually, she is doing some work from home. She's still carrying her responsibilities as the person leading the community center project, and there's lots of moving pieces on that one. We equipped her with the city computer. We connected her here, so she's doing most of the work from there, and then she should be back within about a couple of weeks on a part-time basis. Our finance director should be coming back, hopefully join us within about a few weeks, maybe a couple months, and so we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. In terms of the project budget, you awarded this contract to construction last week. We're well within the project budget, even with this little amendment. If I would ask the deputy city manager to put that slide on the screen so I can walk through that with you. If we can get our electronics worked.
That's why we're getting new electronics.
Can you put it on the screen? We have $385,200 in the total available budget. We had hired a consultant to scope the work and develop a bids, plans, and specifications for this project for $14,600. Bid packet and contract award was $193,436. That was awarded last week with the 15% contingency of $29,000. Contract includes providing some city supply equipment and then the minor electrical work, $20,000. Total project cost is $281,000. Subtract that from the available budget, we still have $103,664. So with that, I will get the consultant on board to do the day-to-day, the supervision of the project. Obviously, he will be still working with me closely and as well as with the deputy city manager while we're waiting perhaps maybe the Sevda gets on board to take over the full responsibility. But in the meantime, I can't hold back on this project. We got to get it done. We have already made arrangements to move a couple or 3 council meetings in May to Maintenance and Operations Center while this room is under construction. And we will have our Planning Commission meetings there also during the construction period. And we hope to come back here with the new system on June 1st. With that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I need a council motion to authorize the city manager to execute contract amount with the RLF Enterprises for the addition of the project management services for 2014 audio-video project by $16,065 That brings the total contract amount to $30,760.
Well, you just said it, so do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Any thoughts or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Lyman.
Okay, we'll move to item 8, contract approval, professional services. Oh, I know this is for Butkus Consulting. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I don't know why my department heads aspire to be city manager, so we have two already. Mike Summerwine is city manager for City of Medina, and then the Cameron Gurrell is going to be the city manager for City of Burien, and we're very proud of them. They've been phenomenal support and resource for us. However, their departure also created a little bit workload problem for me. And while we're going to start the search process, I don't want to rush the search process, particularly for the Cameron's position. It's a very critical position for our community. We're going to take our time and we're going to do it right. That brought up the question for Lyman and I. We're already doing a little bit of the finance director job, and I don't know, the Chris's deputy finance director is appreciative of that one, but she keeps telling us that, I don't need your help, but I'm doing fine. But nonetheless, we'll be going into the budget session. I know Chris is going to be busy, I'm going to be busy, and Lyman is going to be busy. I thought about it, what I can do on an interim basis. I wanted to bring somebody who knows the city, who knows the issues, who's very familiar with the staff, and we couldn't find anybody else better than Pete Butkus. Pete Butkus used to be our deputy city manager. He worked for us many years. He's retired. He doesn't want to do this thing permanent basis. He's going to come over here to help us to work on specifically a few projects that we think they are important. At this juncture, I think it would be appropriate for me to turn it over to our esteemed Deputy City Manager, Lyman Howard. Lyman is talking with Pete. I don't know, he talked to him from Vietnam or somewhere Europe, so he's vacationing, I guess.
I think he might have been in Chile.
In Chile, okay. So, Lyman, you want to walk us through with this contract, please?
Sure. Essentially, Ben has explained the overview as it relates to this particular contract. Generally, what we need to do is we need to supplement our capacity at this particular point in time on a temporary and limited basis, primarily in the areas of management, project coordination, and subject matter expertise. And as Ben mentioned, that's essentially while we embark on our recruitment efforts. It will not be easy to fill Cameron's shoes, and as Ben mentioned, we definitely need some time to do that. Some of the community development projects that are critically on the critical path right now, as you all know, is a comprehensive plan rewrite, the Klahani PAA planning and potential transition, town center planning revisions, economic development, strategic planning efforts as we move forward there, homeless encampment code development, marijuana code development options, cable franchise agreement, among a few other smaller items. So we definitely have a lot going on right now in the city. As Ben mentioned, Butkus Consulting is going to be doing a wonderful job for us as we anticipate. Essentially, one of the reasons the contractor or Butkus Consulting was chosen, essentially he's extremely well thought of by management and staff, the city council and commissions. And as well, he has a wonderful reputation with the citizens of Sammamish. Conversely, he knows the city. He knows the needs and requirements as we move forward, and he also is very familiar with our mode of operations. The contract in and of itself, we anticipate up to 4 months in duration. We've negotiated $100 per hour. There will be no benefits paid as this is a contractor position and not an employee position. 36 hours per week with a total not to exceed $58,000.
I want to thank our Susan Cesar, Community Development, the Deputy Community Development Director sitting out there. And Susan has been dealing day-to-day operations and the permit activities and the long-range planning and many issues. So I sat down with Susan. I said, Susan, do you think you can do both jobs? And says, what did I do to deserve this discussion right now? Susan feels that we also need to get help, and there's just too much stuff is going on. And as being a conscientious person as she is, she's concerned that we may drop the ball. There's too many balls up in the air right now. And we also check with the Susan to make sure that she's going to be comfortable, whoever we're going to bring on board. And she's very comfortable also with this arrangement.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to authorize the city manager to agree into a professional services contract with Butkus Consulting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any conversation, questions?
Kathy.
Kathy?
Just a comment or two. We're really going to miss Cameron, and his shoes are going to be very difficult to fill, and I was very concerned about who might be able to step in and take this over. So I was very pleased when you mentioned that you had talked with Pete Butkus, and he had agreed to come and help us. Pete has just, was such a stalwart and worked with us as founders of the city. So somebody who has the history and the flavor and understands how we work and what our citizens are interested in seeing in the comprehensive plan, I think will add a lot. So I'm very pleased to approve this contract.
I would agree with Deputy Mayor Huckabee. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Okay, we will go back to item number 4, I believe. Mr. City Manager, you have a...
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, we have a staff report. I understand the council member Valderrama wanted to move this out of consent calendar, and I want to thank him also for giving us an advance notice that he's doing that so that we could be prepared some of his questions. I think Laura Philpott, Public Works Director, talked to you already, and we also know that you had your question that in your email that you asked. Besides those two, is there anything specifically that you want us to answer that the Councilmember Valderrama?
No, those are the two questions. When this was originally approved by the council, there was not a business case that was prepared, and we had talked about being able to look at the total cost of the systems and being able to understand the benefits better as the customer user satisfaction, ease of use, as well as the financial break-even. That was it. I wanted to do just a normal health checkup.
Great. And I apologize to you. And earlier today, I told you that I was going to send an email later this afternoon. I grossly underestimate the time that I need to get the other things done, so I don't have the email, but I'm going to have your questions answered. Lyman worked with the Susan and Chris, with Laura and Chris, and I think we got the answer for your question. Lyman, you want to walk through that, please?
I would be happy to. Okay, we are asking council tonight to essentially modify the contract with Spatial Development. Spatial Development is a contractor that we utilize to supplement our own GIS system work. And by way of background, GIS stands for Geographical Information System. We tend to throw the GIS acronym around quite a bit, and a lot of people don't know what it stands for. But essentially what it is a database of tracking assets spatially and features and geographics, and we use them within the city, or are planning on using that information with our new Track It software, which is our permitting system. We're in the process of developing it. It has not been fully implemented yet, but we're very, very close to being able to do that. We also use our GIS system for mapping within the city and a wide variety of things, general mapping as well as specific mapping. And then also getting into some specific mapping related to the stormwater system that we have. We have to provide this due to our MPDES permit as it's set up. In the future, one of the things that we hope to utilize the GIS system for is in the area of asset management. being able to track what assets we have within the city that are city-owned, that need to be maintained, they need to be checked on a regular basis. And so we intend to utilize a GIS system for that as well, or a link to it. The council actually approved the GIS implementation support effort in April of 2012 with spatial development. And we essentially have utilized the $50,000 that council approved at that particular point. What we've used them for, the $50,000, is to supplement the city's GIS technician. We have one GIS technician within the city, and most cities of our size actually have quite a few. The benefits to the GIS system, quite frankly, GIS systems don't generate money for the city. But by automating the processes that are revolving around them, we can reduce expenditures in the long term. Essentially, the biggest benefit that we do get is in meeting our customer service expectations. It's very, very difficult to quantify as such, but we quite honestly can do things faster, more effectively, and more efficiently. Things have not been fully implemented yet, unfortunately, but we are very much on the fast track to do that. We haven't been able to see all the benefit yet from that, but I'll get to the costs and expenditures thus far. But I think you'll be actually quite impressed with how little we've spent. Essentially, one of the benefits that we also get is enhanced and more accurate mapping. All the zoning maps that we produce, or all the what-ifs maps that you all look at, what if this, what if that, we're able to utilize the GIS systems for that, and turnaround by having this internal assists us quite a bit, and we don't have to send out to do certain particular things. We can do it more effectively from a cost and also from a timing standpoint. The new permit system will allow us to specifically track permits in a particular area, in a particular neighborhood. This is getting very close to being implemented as well. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, the tracking of assets that the city actually owns. Roads, playground equipment, wetlands. Also, I'm thinking of the stormwater facilities that we have to track. All of those things for maintenance are going to be very, very important. And then also, as we move forward, again, tracking features like wetlands and buffers when it comes to development, et cetera. How do we work with the developers? What are those considerations that we have to take into consideration? Background on costs as it relates to this particular project. In December 2010, the ARC GIS software was purchased for $2,750. The total maintenance fees since that period of time that we've paid ARC GIS has been about $40,000. The consultant assistance that we talked about with spatial development that was approved in 2012 was $50,000. We have actually used that up, and this contract amendment request is for $25,000 to be used as needed.
Just an example, recently some of you asked for some Klahani maps with the streets on it, and they're showing the boundaries of the neighborhoods and the precincts, and this is all obviously GIS basis mapping. We couldn't do this thing without having the resources in place.
So since we purchased the software in December 2010, we have spent about $92,000 in total, which effectively is pretty good bang for your buck, given the benefits that and the level of service that we provided to the community.
If you were to have FTEs to do this work instead of doing this contracting and half-time technician mix that our IT department is doing so excellently, what would be the cost that if, let's say that we had about 2 or 3 FTEs doing this work?
Well, 2 or 3 FTEs, fully loaded, at the top end of the range would be about $98,000 per employee with salaries and benefits.
Per year?
Per year. Supporting revenues for the technology fund, essentially we utilize general tax dollars for the bulk of it. And This is a little bit additional background information that we've received some questions on in the last several days. General tax dollars annually, we receive about $635,000 to $665,000 approximately. It varies by year depending on what revenue we receive through the technology fee that was passed in 2011. If you'll recall, council actually carved out a technology fee component to our permitting costs, our permit costs of permit. Of the 3% technology fee, 1.7 goes to the city and 1.3% goes to handle my building permit.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part?
Yes, of the 3% technology fee, 1.7% flows to the city, and the 1.3% of that technology fee flows to the eGov Alliance to support mybuildingpermit.com. Essentially, council decided at that particular point in time that we would try to collect some additional fee from the people that are actually benefiting from the technology that they would in fact be utilizing. The tech fund that we have in Sammamish is an internal service fund, and it supports all the computers, the software application support, system administration, the local and wide area networks, web services, eGov Alliance, and then again, this particular component, the GIS, and all of our telecommunication services. In conclusion, in order to fully avail ourselves of the geographical information system, we do need to call upon assistance to supplement our internal capacity. This is consistent with our mode of operations as designed by the council. Our core services are provided internally, but when needed, we do supplement them from external sources. So I guess in conclusion, I'd like to request a motion to authorize the city manager to execute a contract amendment with Spatial Development in an amount not to exceed $25,000 to be used if and as needed. And I'd also entertain any questions you might have.
First, can I have a motion to approve?
I have okay, before the
So
discussion. All moved, so second.
You have a question?
I have a question. And first of all, I want to thank you, Lyman, for the presentation. I know, as shown by the last two motions, we're being short-staffed, so I appreciate your taking the time to go over this. I'm a big advocate of GIS systems, and one of my past many lives, I was also in charge of for SPADEC and GOI analytics for the combination of GIS predictive analytics with satellite imagery for both the U.S. and our defense and intelligence activities. So there's a lot of opportunities. I would hope that as we go forward, we are able to quantify the ease of use online application that people are able to do that we had discussed, and savings in times, both for staff and that, just to be able to keep track of that as a practice. But I appreciate the time that you've taken in walking us through this at this time.
Good. Thank you.
With that, Mr. Mayor, we'll ask the council's approval of this contract.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second.
Yes, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Lyman.
Next, we have council reports. I will start with a couple things. One is that a few weeks ago, we approved my signing a letter as mayor to support the county in their, I'm going to get the letters wrong, the TIB, the Transportation
Improvement
Board, right. And we did that. We have not, however, approved as a council, so I was going to suggest that we bring back a resolution that we can look at our next meeting to support the TIB. Do we have a motion to approve that, or approve the motion?
I'd like to move that we request the staff to bring back a resolution approving the TIB.
You have a second?
Second.
And this is, we talk about the countywide, the transportation
countywide,
benefit
in
districts.
support
and-
of
right.
transit and roads.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, so this is the
Right.
TPP.
Councilmember Witten?
With all of the changes that are on staff and people leaving, do we have enough manpower to do things that aren't absolutely critical in this time period? I mean, I'm happy, I think it's a good topic, but, I mean, I've been trying to get a report on the community center done and understand that's a staffing issue partly. I understand we have all these other things, and we're bringing people on board that will be jumping in literally to all these things that we have going on. So I think it's an excellent suggestion, but I mean, I'm just concerned that we should be very careful about adding things that aren't absolutely critical in this next couple months. I think we need to protect staff from the extras. Now, I know it's coming up for a vote, so the timing is important, but I guess I'd like staff to address that and tell us if this kind of thing is a great topic and really helpful, I think, in some respects to our citizens, but is it right for us, given your stresses right now in terms of personnel?
Thank you. And I thank you for that consideration, the council member with. And I think that this particular one will be probably easy because we're not the only jurisdiction is acting on this. So it's a simple search, finding what the other jurisdictions' resolutions are, and also inviting the pros and cons. This probably won't take us more than about an hour to get the packet ready and to invite the people to come to it. So we can manage it. Part of it is the significance because the election is about to happen. And then I know our council took an informal position on this thing. I think that the taking a formal position will be very helpful in the regional arena. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Councilmember Jaron?
Thank you. I was mistaken. It's not TIB, it's Transportation District, King County Transportation
Right.
District.
Yes, okay.
And it was discussed at Eastside Transportation Partnership last Friday also. John Resch, a staff person from King County, who is the interim director of it, gave us a report. And just to remind the audience, that's the proposal to increase the sales tax by 0.1% in King County and to establish a $60 vehicle fee, both of those revenue sources to sunset in 10 years. And then the funds raised would be used 60% to supplement the Metro budget, which without that, they will be dropping 17%, about 600,000 hours of service this year. And that's critical for, particularly for Sammamish being out in the outlying areas of the urban centers here. The other 40% will be going to the cities and unincorporated King County per capita, and the estimate for Sammamish that would benefit from this is something like $1.25 million a year, isn't it?
That's correct.
So for 10 years, that would be over $12 million. So I feel this is very important to the city. I'm personally supportive of it, and I will vote for this request to have the staff prepare the resolution.
Any other comments? All in favor of the motion? Say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, I also was at the Eastside, or Eastside Fire and Rescue board meeting and also retreat last week. The board meeting itself was not particularly long. I will be passing along to those of you who don't already have it the documents for that in terms of looking at finance and operations and a number of other things. And actually, the meeting went very quickly. We did select a new chair. Eileen Barber of Issaquah is the chair. Mike Mitchell of District 10 is the vice chair. And we informed them of our appointments for the three committees, the two former standing committees and the new one, the Operations Committee. The Finance and Operations Committee member from us will be Don Gerand, and I will be in the Regional and Personnel Committee, and Laura Philpott will be our representative for the Operations Committee, and I believe Councilmember Huckabee will be attending those meetings as well. So we did go into a retreat where, again, like our retreat, nothing was decided, but lots was talked about. I thought it was interesting to note that a number of the issues brought up by the administration, including some, what I think some thoughtful and forward-looking opportunities to be more efficient. Again, to look at, I'll just read these, conduct an assessment of headquarters staffing, and again, explore the potential to consolidate some functions with partner cities. So looking for ways to use the power of the cities in their operations. I think that's good. They're also doing, completing work with the Regional Fire Engine Group to establish a multi-jurisdictional specification. What that means is that they want to create the ideal fire truck that they can use in almost any situation, except for perhaps the ladder truck type of situation.
Can they do the planning activities in that truck and then the finance activities?
They can do all of that.
They can do all that stuff.
So
I want one of those too.
Then multi-jurisdictions, actually across the country, can, once they pick a maker or a builder for that, we'll be able to buy them and hopefully have economies of scale in terms of price. So it also helps in some other ways in terms of using the equipment on the truck and so on. And the last one I would mention is the work to create an insurance efficiencies by establishing a regional insurance pool. So there are a number of interesting ideas that they're looking at. Beyond that, in terms of budget goals, one of the things that was mentioned, there were a number, weren't a whole lot, actually. The charge to the cities and the districts is to come up with, as we are here doing in our city, ideas for the new budget, things that we should consider. One of the, I think the most important one that I thought was very interesting was to have our first EF&R strategic plan. And so they may be working on that next year, but also to look at efficiencies throughout the organization to find ways to, by efficiency, I mean do the job better, but also perhaps save money. They talked about the new operations committee. That is going to be underway soon. One of the first things that it'll be working on is the proposed nonprofit organization in the city, and I think in general, they will also, when they have time, look at other projects, but also, again, efficiencies in their system. So that's my report.
I could make some quick comments about the SCA Public Issues Committee.
Okay.
That met on March 12th. While I was not sitting at the table, I was an alternate and attended. So I can make a couple of notes for
Councilmember Rodell.
Rodell, correct. Really, the focus of the meeting, two discussion areas. One was climate change, and they actually had a session early on where they talked about it prior to the meeting. And then in the meeting, what they were focusing on is trying to create a menu of options for every city to consider in their comprehensive plan to reduce greenhouse gases. The state and the county both have targets that they're trying to meet in reductions. And so, again, the discussion was around trying to create a menu of items that every city could really pick from to try and incorporate into their comprehensive plans. And examples of that would be higher density in some areas because it's more efficient to heat, would reduce greenhouse gases, transportation in a city, and then also environmental protection. Trees and that sort of thing would be helpful to reduce greenhouse gases. So their objective is to try and put that menu together so it's something that we can look at as we work through our comprehensive plans. The other issue, hazardous waste fee rate change was one of the discussions. They talked about really wouldn't affect anyone, what they were, us or the rate payers, except for they wanted to change the way it was allocated to the high-end users, in particular for corporate users that were, the way the rate is now allocated, small volume, one can of waste that's picked up is charged much more than somebody that is a frequent user of it. So they wanted to try and adjust how the rates were allocated. That's it.
Okay. You want at this end?
Yeah.
Councilmember Jaron.
Thank you. I'd like to report on the National League of Cities Congressional Conference that we attended, three of us attended last week. And what I brought back was some of the handouts that the National League of Cities, their federal priorities for action this year. Besides those priorities, we had committee meetings, and I was on the Information Technology and Communications Committee, and I wrote up an extensive report on that, which I emailed to everybody. But I have flyers here. The first priority, national priority, was support marketplace fairness, and that is the taxation on internet sales, which would greatly benefit our city and other cities in the state. And that act passed the Senate last year by 69 to 27, and there's a bill pending in the House and is held up in the House Judiciary Committee. The chairman's holding it up, so we're trying to put pressure to break that loose and get that passed this year. The next priority interest was the transportation priority, and that is moving ahead for progress in the 21st century, which is MAP 21. That's the Federal Transportation Program. And it's a 2-year program, which, a copy there for you. 2-year program which funds highway transit and surface transportation programs, of which hundreds of millions come to the Puget Sound Regional Council. And so we're concerned about that extension, so we're putting effort on that. Both of our senators support both the marketplace fairness and extension of the transportation priorities. Then another issue was protecting municipal bonds, and the tax exemption of municipal bonds is very important to cities. In fact, a number over $3.7 trillion in outstanding tax-exempt bonds issued by 30,000 separate government units. And local governments save an average of 25 to 30% on interest costs because of these tax exemptions. And our senators were very supportive of that, too. And then some of the other issues we have is fix the nation's broken immigration system, and then strengthen the nation's education pipeline. And the last one was support community resilience, and I'm not going to go into the details on that. I felt it was a very good conference, and there were good workshops and some good speeches by secretaries of HUD and education and other federal agencies. And that's my report.
Okay, any other reports tonight?
Yes, thank you. I had the.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Whitten.
I didn't hear you. I see your hand.
You weren't looking. I had several citizens come to me and talk to me about the community center and some of their concerns. And 3 weeks ago, we asked for a status report at the council. That majority didn't support that. Last week, we were asked to approve a contract relating to the community center. And I understand staff has now issued a determination of non-significance or mitigated, I'm not sure which. But it puts us at a disadvantage when we're on the council and the public is more informed than we are. So I hope that I understand that staffing is a real issue, but I am hoping that we can get a good comprehensive report sooner than later on the status of the community center. Because it's embarrassing not to be able to understand what the issues are for our community and citizens, and basically have them explaining it to us. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Huckabee.
Thank you. Last week, I took the opportunity to go to the Sustainability Awards program at the Bullitt Center, and there was a training for eco-districts afterward. I saw Cameron was there, and a number of people from a variety of cities, and Issaquah won an award for their zero energy project, and I had the opportunity to talk to some of those folks. Snoqualmie won an award for the community center that it's built in conjunction with the Y, which is I believe it was a gold LEED project. There were many cities, many awards, so many wonderful opportunities, and I really want to encourage the council, and I would like to bring back some further information about how we can participate in this. It seems like cities all around us are doing various and sundry projects. There's the Green Tools organization from the county that is working with cities. I think it would be appropriate to have someone from that group come to the Planning Commission. I know that a number of the Planning Commission members are interested in this issue of sustainability. And I was very impressed the way they've wrapped this into the fact that being sustainable, being walkable, creating districts in the community where you have walkable trails and paths, make the community more economically viable, make it more welcoming, make it more interesting to the population. So it's not just, oh, we have to, save the environment. It's let's make it more attractive by making it more sustainable, and these communities are very successful. So I think there's some really interesting opportunities, and I've ordered the book Solar City, so beware.
Any other reports? Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to reiterate the comments made by Councilmember Witten on the community center. It has been 5 months since our last update on the most expensive and biggest project of the city. The last two items that have come to our attention, as mentioned before, both the waiver that was given by the city and now this determination have come to our attention from the citizens. So we would appreciate as early as possible to have that update given to us, recognizing the constraints we're currently under. Also, I was at the National League of Cities with council members Odell and Gerund. I would report on it, but it was so extensively reported on that there is no need, and the minutes are available. I would, however, cite that last week I was not here for that reason, and two topics were raised, and I just wanted to share that on 187th, as we started to look at the parking of Sammamish Landing, as I go by there, I see that on one side of the road, Redmond has marked a bike lane about 2.5 feet, and then cars go by. On the other side, they marked the entire street as for being shared by cars and by bicycles. And I'm wondering, logically, why couldn't they do that to both sides of the road? And I would ask that our city go back again to request if they could share, as they did in the past, both sides of the road, albeit or alternately, if they're not, given that we're looking at trying to replace those spots, that our great partner city of Redmond and partner in this park look at helping to contribute to that parking that we're now looking at. I think it's only fair.
I can answer that question fairly quickly.
Thank you.
It's that I've done this in the past in my career when I was a public works director too. It's not unusual that in uphill section of any roadway that you put a separate bike lanes, but if it's downhill section, that it's very common to use the bike lane joined with the travel lanes. So in that, I'm trying to see, going uphill is the westbound or the northbound?
East.
Would be
Northeast,
eastbound.
Northeast, maybe.
Yes.
And that's because it's a steep hill going up there, and that's very typical that you put a separate bike lane so the bikes cannot keep up with the 25 miles speed. But coming down the hill, they can actually work with the existing speed limit is 20. So that's the answer. That doesn't mean that I'm underestimating your comments in regards to your desire to ask the Redmond to contribute to the...
Especially since to date they have been doing that, so I appreciate your following up on that.
We'll do it again.
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, I'd also missed the discussion on the Big Rock Park and just I know there was an extensive discussion on it, and my interest is to continue to abide by the citizens' desires and the donors to keep that as a passive park overall, not to take too much time here.
You missed the zip line.
Yeah, well, exactly, that's why I want a passive park.
Well, I think while you were gone, Councilmember Valderrama, council added all kinds of stuff on that park the things that you don't want to see, they
I'm
put
going to
back
suit
all
up
of
later.
them on.
I mean,
Thank
the
you.
train that runs through, we didn't tell them about that?
Okay. And the soccer fields, right?
Yes, right.
Well, no, that's okay.
That's all right. Okay, any other council reports? I think that's it. City manager?
Mr. Mayor, I don't want the time to deceive us. It's 8 o'clock, and I have a long city manager's report. We're going to get into that one in a minute, but I want to remind the council that we do have an executive session, and we're probably going to take an action after the executive session. So we got two items that we are going to discuss, at least one of those items that we will be asking for council to take an action, or at least give me direction. To tonight's discussion, it's related to the comprehensive plan rewrite. We came to you last fall, and we went through to give you the status update. You have asked us many items to be included in the rewrite. And I asked our community development director and assistant city manager to work with our consultants, work with staff, to come up with the estimates. and they have been doing some estimates. I want to give you a little heads up. I'm saying estimates, partly because the scope of some of the changes or additions were not clear, therefore we couldn't get you more specific estimates. Hopefully tonight we clarify those with you, and that will give us a guidance to go back to the consultants to see what are the price tag of some of those additions to our comprehensive plan. Without further ado, I'm going to ask our Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director to give you the detailed report on this, and I will be recusing myself for the first part of the discussion.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thanks again to everybody for all of the wonderful comments. I don't think I will get a tape of tonight's meeting, I can guarantee you here, so I can watch it from time to time. My goal is to go through a handful of slides for you and then to answer your questions. The comprehensive plan process, as the council will recall, we got started using the adopted 2013-14 budget for staff and consultants, and that was based on kind of the minimum resources we needed to meet state law requirements and a 2015 deadline. The end of the last year, council adopted a resolution which added some additional items to the scope of work, many of which, if you just look at the whole of that list, we can accommodate without any real additional consultant or staff time. But a few of them do require additional time, and that resolution directs us to come back with cost and time estimates. Your packet for tonight has a memo and an attachment that goes through that material. We've used the same format as the attachment to your resolution from last December, so just mimic that list. Following your direction tonight, we'll return with any contract amendments that are necessary to follow up on that direction and add more resources to our process. There are 4 major studies that require the additional resources. The Notch, you've heard about, Klahani, R1 zoned area, and Town Center. Now, Ben, as you recall, has a perceived conflict of interest with the Notch because he resides in that area. And so that's the reason he stepped out of the room right now. So I'm going to go through the Notch here. With regard to Notch, I report to Lyman Howard, our Deputy City Manager. And I want to reemphasize that, as I said before, Ben has been a role model for me. On this issue, he's been absolutely scrupulous of not being in the chain of command in terms of policy direction for here. So there's not only not a real conflict of interest, there's not a perceived conflict of interest. And so I want to reiterate that. Late last week, though, Ben did ask specifically for some information to prepare for tonight's meeting. And so some people in the Notch have seen an email where I say that the city manager has asked for recent kind of a survey of where folks who live in the Notch feel about the idea of amending the UGA and potentially coming into the city. So that email has circulated around. It uses the term city manager because I wrote that in the email. And Ben's goal in doing that was not to direct the outcome, but rather to say, if the city of Sammamish is going to spend taxpayer dollars studying this issue, we need to make sure that, in fact, there is some support, enough support out within the Notch to merit that expenditure. We did not want to have those city of Sammamish taxpayer dollars going towards a study where the outcome was less than a majority or sufficiently squishy. You heard some numbers earlier tonight that those survey results show now a majority of acreage and a majority of assessed valuation support the idea of UGA change and eventual annexation. There's a lot of ways to measure interest there, and there are still, there's no question, you also heard from Mr. Brougham, there are still differences of opinion out there. So it is by no means uniform, but our question was there sufficient support? And I think we got the answer clearly is yes from the survey results. So I just wanted to make sure that that is the only time that Ben has actually asked for any work to be done on the subject. And so I'm continuing to report to Lyman as we go through this process. So as you can see from our memo, we wanted to both remind the council your direction, which was to go ahead and include it in the comp plan rewrite, provide documentation to support an urban growth boundary amendment that we would need to make to King County, because remember, this is an area that is not even in the UGA at this point. It is outside the urban growth area. It's a rural designated area. It's a bit of an odd duck, which is why we call it the Notch. If you go along that area along Duthie Hill Road, all the area of Duthie Hill Road and the area essentially north of Duthie Hill Road is either unincorporated urban or incorporated Sammamish. So this is an exception to that large area on the north side of the road. We would look at coming up with land use and zoning designations. We'd look at environmental issues, transportation conditions, and of course there would be public outreach. So we wouldn't be depending just on the citizens themselves to survey, but the city would be engaged in that process. Our comments here, as we wrote that memo, the perspectives of the local residents were uncertain. We have a little more positive indication from the report that we got. I think it was very late Sunday evening from one of the residents you heard from tonight. The issues out there still appear to be zoning densities and transportation connections. Those have been the issues since I first started working on this area, so no real news there. We just have to, and the study would in fact look at various options for zoning densities, and we'd take public input, we'd look at environmental issues, we'd look at transportation, and then a recommendation would be made on to the Planning Commission and the City Council for what those zoning densities would actually be. And eventually, again, we need King County to approve this. Having this put into the comprehensive plan rewrite process does make good sense from a timing perspective, because as you recall, the county only entertains these urban growth area line changes every 4 years. They entertained it for the Notch in 2008. It was not approved. In 2012, it was not approved. The next opportunity is 2016. So if we're going to do this, now's the time to do the study, and we can incorporate it into the comprehensive plan rewrite. Then, assuming that is something that merits approval by the council in 2015, then it would be packaged up and relayed on to King County. I don't think we can predict with certainty what that outcome would be, but we would at least have good documentation, including the latest information on all the issues I've mentioned, to include with that request. So that's the background. So staff are more supportive of including this in the process.
Any questions?
No.
The only question that I have is the cost. I wasn't here in 2012 when the last effort was made, but there were a lot of comments tonight that a lot of material and information was presented for that process to go before the county. So are we building on that information in this study? It seemed like perhaps the study should be less expensive.
Yeah. Well, in all cases, and I think Ben mentioned this, we will, based on your direction tonight, we will work with the consultants and do our best to refine those costs and refine the scope. And yes, we will take advantage of work that has been done in the past. That work has not been done by consultants. The city staff did most of that work at the time. So yes, it will still be available. We'll use whatever local resources from the residents themselves. So if we don't need to spend all of the $20,000, we'll spend as little as we can. I'll make the observation, our department does its best to actually underspend for most of the contracts that we have. We often have money left over in professional services, and there's no rush to spend it at the end of the year. So we'll try to mine the store there. But I think there's also an observation that with everything that's going on right now, in this case, our recommendation is to go ahead and use consultants for most of this. There's also a good argument to be made to having a fair, objective party, third party, kind of work through the information and collect the citizen comment, would make all parties out there, since there is still a divide, feel a little more comfortable that their voice is being heard and accurately represented. So there's some merit in that, but we'll try to keep costs down.
No, thank you. I wasn't aware of what we had done in 2012, so that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Valderrama?
Yeah, I have a question, Cameron. First of all, I want to thank you for walking through this. Given the past experience that you've had with this process in King County in addressing the issues of land use, zoning designations, environmental issues, the land, as you had cited, those are the more critical ones that we're going to be looking at here. Do you feel confident that we'll be able to address that, given that you're going to be leaving town? You can give us a more candid.
So it'd be easy for me to say, sure, no problem, this is a walk in the park. And I don't think it is a walk in the park. The reason I put those items up there because I think those are the most important to the local residents, and as a planner, those are very important to what the land use designation options that would be selected and analyzed. I think there's another policy issue, and maybe you're hinting at this, Councilmember Valderrama, is that King County is the decision maker on the urban growth boundary.
Exactly.
And that's the big issue here. That's the gateway issue. One of the reasons that this is not exactly a walk in the park is that modifying the urban growth boundary is something that King County does not take lightly at all. And part of the reason that this has not been approved in years past is that there have been other proposals to modify the urban growth boundary, perhaps with less merit than this proposal. And as the county approaches each of these, unless it's a call to shrink the boundary and make that boundary even more compact, usually it's a proposal to expand the boundary, the county is looking at essentially the cumulative effect and the sort of camel's nose under the tent issue, I guess you'd say. So they're reluctant to make a change even in an area that might have some merit for fear of creating a precedent in another area and then putting themselves in an awkward position. So something we have to keep in mind as we go through the process. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Councilmember Whitten?
You know, they have donut holes, and this isn't quite a donut hole, but it's half of one. And Mystic Lake was almost identical. It has a very sensitive wetland that they called Mystic Lake, that they turned it into not just R1, but R4. There's no differentiation, no basis, in fact, I don't think, for differentiating between the two. So I'm not sure what the county political realities are, but they just don't seem to be consistent because they have the precedent of Mystic Lake here. I would be very concerned. This is an environmentally sensitive area. I was actually involved in an appeal of Trossig's years ago in '96, I think, and '5. And it really should not be high density to protect at least much of it. On the other hand, some of it has stub roads going right to horse pastures and things that are meant to connect through the notch to the other side. So it's not logical on the part of the county what they're doing.
I think you're right on all those fronts. So, you know, as a planner, I think the zoning densities are going to be low when we look at those options. R1 is favored by some of the property owners, R4 by others. I doubt we would look at much higher densities than that in terms of the options there. So it will still be a fairly low density area. It is surrounded by, as you mentioned, on three sides by incorporated Sammamish, zoned R4 and built largely at R4.
Last chance, Bob Keller?
Yeah,
Councilmember Keller, I mean.
Yeah, I would like to, make the comment that, and extend what you just said, on three sides, it's surrounded by Sammamish, but the commute route for a lot of the residents of Sammamish go right down that other side, that is the county. And so it is really important for us to be looking at that area just to help the current residents in Sammamish, let alone help the people that live in the Notch. Obviously, they have to get out of that area onto that road that our traffic is going past. So we have a mutual benefit for the residents of that area, as well as the residents of Sammamish right now, to try and work on the road. So I would think that the county, I would hope that when that was presented to them, if they looked at the traffic pattern, that they would understand that and look at it favorably. If the people in the Notch wanted to come into the city of Sammamish, that they would look favorably on that change.
Any other? Councilmember Jarrand?
Just briefly, I would support moving forward with this. As Mr. Keller pointed out, the road right now is in the county, and on both sides of it is owned by us. It just makes sense to incorporate this, so I'm not sure what the next process is. Are we ready to say, yes, let's go forward with this?
We need a consensus and direction from the council here tonight, and you can do that either with a head nod, or if you really do need to take a straw poll, we can do that. And we can do it one by one, or you can do them all at the end. It's at the council's pleasure.
I think we've had several comments. I would be in favor of continuing this process, and can we have you just raise your hands? Is that not a vote? It's just a nod, so to speak? Okay, I think we're all.
Okay, so we're done with that one.
And I know Councilmember Odell, who led the charge 2 years ago. Would be in favor
That's
as
probably
well.
fair to say.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, and Lyman, you'll make sure Ben can come back into the room now. we'll go ahead and get started. This is another area largely, I think, of pretty good knowledge, given the council's previous actions, the Klahani annexation study. Your direction, provide information analysis to support an actual annexation proposal that we would try to schedule, and then include the Klahani area in the comprehensive plan rewrite. What we've done in your materials there is to favor kind of the first step, which is the materials that would be necessary for what we're calling first phase work to support a comp plan amendment that we'd actually propose the council entertain and adopt this year. A 2014 comp plan amendment to add Sammamish, or add Klahani to the Sammamish PAA. And that would also involve providing support work for our work with the Growth Management Planning Council, or GMPC, and with King County. So the PAA, as you recall, right now Klahani is in Issaquah's PAA. Two things have to happen, or I guess you'd say three things have to happen for it to shift to our PAA. One, Issaquah would retract. Two, we would adopt that PAA. And third, that adoption would be recognized by the Growth Management Planning Council and King County in the countywide planning policies. This is the one which has way more acronyms and abbreviations than any other subject, so I apologize for CPPs, BRBs, GMPCs, and all sorts of other alphabet soup. So the first phase work is largely a revenue and expenditure analysis. It's based on a conditions report, and the good news is that we can utilize the work that Issaquah has already done. Much of it is reasonably recent. Some of it might have to be updated a little bit, and some internal staff work to produce the necessary materials. We'll observe that the cost estimate that you have in the memo there is just for the annexation work. If we're going to bring Klahani into the comp plan, as you have already asked us to do, we'll probably come back to you for some additional resources to do that. But this would at least focus on the key critical path issue for 2014, which is our own comprehensive plan and the GMPC process. Questions?
Councilmember Valderrama?
Now, I believe that the city of Sammamish needs to go forward. We've promised the citizens of Klahani that upon the failing of the Issaquah annexation, that we would move to fast-track it. This is part of that. We've laid out the schedules. I am, however, a little bit concerned on the dollar amounts, following up on what Councilmember Huckabee had said previously on there on the $50,000 plus another amount for the transportation study. Given that there has been a $100,000 Nesbit study done already by Issaquah on the exact same area, we know that fire isn't changing, water isn't changing, we've already got the input from the police, schools aren't involved, so if the original Nesbit study cost $100,000, is this just to make sure that there's no way we blow the budget, or where's the $50,000 come from, since it's the same exact area that we're talking about?
Well, it is, and I wish it were as simple as erasing Issaquah and inserting Sammamish, but then the study would be
Listen to your numbers.
Yeah, would it be absolutely wrong, and of course wouldn't inform your process and wouldn't be leading to good decision-making. We have to run the financial analysis based on our own financial expected revenues and costs. They're not going to be exactly what Issaquah's are, so we'll have to do our own work, number one. As I said, the good news is that we can use some of the base data that Issaquah has collected, as long as it meets two criteria. It's accurate, and it's recent enough that we don't think conditions have changed since it was collected. As data gets older and older, especially things like condition reports for streets or stormwater or parks, conditions change over time, so we want to make sure that we give you accurate information. So part of that is a due diligence process to make sure that that information is in fact accurate. There's also a component here that will support some public outreach that needs to be done with the citizens there. Sammamish has not really been out working with the Klahani area in a formal sense for quite some time. So we cannot substitute either a citizen group on its own or the city of Issaquah's public outreach for our own public outreach. So we need to do at least some of that work as well. This is our best estimate given what we know. You'll see in a slide later on, I added, based on discussion with our public works folks, an estimate for the transportation cost, similar to one of the other costs that we had for one of the other studies of, I think, about $7,000. And again, that looks at not just Issaquah's level of service and Issaquah's policies, but how Klahani's roads would fit into Sammamish's policies and Sammamish's concurrency system, and that kind of thing. So we're trying to make sure we get you a good amount of information. If we don't need to spend all the $50,000, we will not. But that is our best estimate given what we've heard so far and what materials we have to work with.
I would ask that on the outreach effort, that we also now start to move forward with incorporating the Klahani area with our newsletter, our city newsletter, as something that we can start to begin with and consider going forward with those type of communications.
I'll be happy to talk with Ben and Tim about starting that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is that, do we have enough support to keep going on this?
I think we do.
That's from...
Raise your hand. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. R1 is the next one on the list there, and you heard a lot of public input. As the council described this study last year, I will gently use the phrase, the study sort of became a bit of a catch-all for a lot of things that were going on. Recall that you had the density calculation pilot project that had come through the Planning Commission. You had a couple of docket applications. Mr. Timmerman here had submitted one of those. And there were other inputs. Today you got a letter from the master builders. I think that was provided there. You've had public comment here in support of doing an R1 study. So there's a lot of folks interested in the area. The staff comment, though, I guess you'd say we're cautious that a large, somewhat diffusely defined study on a very large area of the city, R1 zoning encompasses over 20% of our designated area, plus looking at the R1 areas out in the PAAs is by definition a large area to look at. We're talking about thousands of parcels. And some of these issues are also fairly controversial. Public outreach has already identified some sensitive issues. You may recall last week the council heard from neighbors in, what's the Broadmoor area on the north part of the city who are concerned about the R1 study, and they would just as soon we not do one because they're concerned about additional development capacity coming out of that study. So you're hearing kind of both going on at this point. We would note for the council there are some potential impacts to transportation and environment. Those are probably modest at best. Neighborhood character might be another thing, and a lot of people would be sensitive on that. So we do need some additional council direction. We're happy to make some suggestions in that regard if that's helpful, but we would suggest that we not too widely or diffusely define the scope of this study so that we can keep this relatively narrow, not put cost pressure on, and not kind of stir up too much undue anxiousness out there.
Deputy Mayor Huckabeck, yeah.
Yes, you said you would offer some advice. How would you recommend that we narrow the scope of this? And first, before you answer that, do we need to do the rezoning to meet our growth targets? Or is my understanding is that we would meet our growth targets under the current zoning?
I think you're correct that we have sufficient capacity to accommodate our growth targets. So this is not being prompted by a need for additional zoned land. I think most of the interest in prompting this is folks that have property that is developable. Probably in simplest terms, I'd say, well, here's my piece of property. It looks just like the one across the street that's zoned R4 or something else, and we're in the same basin. I have the same or less critical areas, and why am I zoned R1? And so that's kind of the concern that we have heard. And as Mr. Kipp said, R1 zone does have some additional requirements associated with it. There's a requirement for setting aside half the property in open space. Now, that doesn't cut down on the yield, but it does mean that a large amount of the property is not available for development. So it can have a practical effect on how many units you would get at the end of the day. So there are some concerns, I think, that we have heard over the years from property owners that have just expressed with the sort of critical areas, the R1 zone limitations, and the net density requirements in the city, boy, we're sort of a triple whammy on what we can actually get out of our property. And isn't there a way that we could do something that might be a little bit closer to other jurisdictions on at least one or two of those areas? So if we were going to you asked for a staff suggestion, we're concerned about changing the maps. The maps, anytime you start changing land use designations on maps, it gets by inherently controversial, and there's either a Me Too factor or a no way Jose factor. There might be some merit in looking again at the density calculation methodology for the R1 area and offering some potential flexibility for that, because that is one of those big three that tend to be limitations. Our sense is that if there is a council desire to look at some responsiveness to those property owners, that we choose one, maybe two of those methods to look at and analyze the implications of, but we not venture down the road of too much rezoning.
Councilmember Whitten?
Staff did not capture what I thought we discussed at the retreat. I'm interested not in densifying the city and doing away with R1. I'm personally interested in seeing three things. The first one would be, do some of the requirements of the R1 not make sense from everybody's standpoint? And I don't think, I think they need to be tweaked maybe in a case, but by and large, my second one is to look at making them more restrictive, not less restrictive in some respects, because of the stormwater issues. The third one was, I was interested in seeing if the zoning map should be expanded to, when we went through the critical areas, it became very apparent that even though they were in the no disturbance, whether they were R4 or R1 was meaningless without some further action because they were in the no disturbance area. My thought was that steep slopes, particularly in the no disturbance area, should be reviewed to see should they be R1 rather than R4. If we're ever going to come back and try and accommodate these people, you want to do it at a density level. Going back historically, all of these R1 zones were imposed for specific environmental reasons, specific considerations. I think before you start doing rezoning and significantly changing the character of the R1, you've got to look at why they were put in there. And some of them were put in there for Lake Sammamish, some of them were put in there for steep slopes, some put in there for wetland protection. And the higher the classification of wetlands, even the impervious surface limitation changed. So when I agreed to take a look at this, it was to look at it from both sides, not just do we want to densify, how can we make it less onerous? Is there a reason to make it less onerous because they're not accomplishing the environmental objectives for which this is mostly imposed? And then to stormwater was critical to me with all of our wetland resources and our Lake Sammamish and the steep slopes. And if you increase density, are you going to having to look at impervious surface limitations? So if we do a study, I hope we expand it to take a look. And if you study areas for rezoning, then I think you need to take a look and see what areas should we be lifting it from and what areas should we be imposing it upon. And that would be very controversial, even if they can't build there anyway. The second one would be what are the stormwater impacts of any of these changes? And that to me is huge and cumulatively. People want to make a larger profit, which is perfectly justifiable and acceptable, but their property has been zoned that way for decades because typically of environmental sensitivities, and the county did tremendous amounts of studies on that. And yet you hear people saying or suggesting it was an arbitrary action on the county, and it wasn't. So my thought is, if you're going to do a study at all, then you need to look at all aspects of it and not just ones that favor the landowners.
Councilmember Valderrama?
Yeah, following on that and making it more extensive, I think we'd have to be very careful on the scoping of this. When we looked at the environmental critical areas, while we had a number of issues, it had primarily a handful of pilots that became the most contentious and the issues surrounding that. And that became an 18-plus month effort going forward. So how do we avoid going down that, given the limitations on staff time right now and council time? And I know the Planning Commission is completely swamped in what they're doing. We've just added Klahani onto them, now the Notch. So is there a way that we can scope this into something that's reasonable, that doesn't drown everybody at the same time at this critical juncture?
Well, I'll try to help Cameron here. It's the top part of the difficulty, Councilmember Valderrama. Oh, by the way, thank you for your comments and thank you for your consideration of the staffing issues that we're going through recently. We have, if we want to do this, it has to be large enough so that we don't accuse of doing a spot zoning. You can't just narrow it down to one particular neighborhood or location. And then there's a danger pothole by doing that. I'm going to have our city attorney comment on that. Is that spot zoning, and that's no in the government. You can't just focus on one particular area to change the zoning. From our perspective as a staff, that if we expand the scope, then what I'm hearing from Community Development Director and the Deputy Community Development Director and the City Attorney, this probably is the most controversial part of the comprehensive plan rewrite. It's going to take some time. Because this affects not only the people that were considering changing their zones, but the surrounding neighborhoods. They will be concerned about it. It's double-edged sword how you want to handle this thing. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike and then Cameron to if there's anything else you guys want to add to that.
Nothing of great substance. I mean, it's likely not a true spot zone in a legal sense, but it does create the types of inequities that Ben's talking about that do lead to other challenges and that the Growth Board specifically looks at. I also second wholeheartedly Ben's comment that of everything on your comp plan rewrite list right now, this is the one that would engender the most feelings over the longest period of time.
And just maybe a quick comment. Part of our challenge as staff is that we're hearing a desire that's really coming from two sides. I made the joke that the council asked us to go this way, and not because I think, well, you're hearing input from the public and you're hearing some of your own members express a desire. Those desires are not heading in the same direction. So that's part of our challenge right now, is if we can figure out a way of getting more alignment as to the direction we want to go, and keeping it narrowly focused, then I think we can deliver a good product on time. If we stay fuzzy and it's very large in scope, then it's harder to predict that outcome.
Councilmember Keller?
I'm curious about something. The reason, my understanding, the reason the R1 zoning was done in many areas was to protect a valued sensitive area or wildlife habitat. And our city has a lot of R1 zoning in it. In addition to the R1 zoning, there was the SO 180 overlay, the SO 190 overlay, which were special conditions imposed on top of the R1 zoning that had been imposed. So there were areas of high priority and sensitivity that were looked at as a holistic or a total view. And so I asked myself, when we say we're going to rezone R1, are we going to look at 1,000 properties and evaluate each property, each parcel in its sensitivity, or are we going to look in general areas that have sensitive impacts to them and then maybe be analyzing those properties that are involved in that sensitive area?
Yeah, and I think you raise a very good point that just the scope of the area, number one, is pretty large. And you're exactly right about the history of how the R1 zoning came to be. And since it was adopted initially by King County and then kept on as we incorporated, we've added on additional environmental protections with the original special district overlays. Now they're incorporated into overlays that we have in our critical areas code. We've also adopted net density, which was more than what the county had at the time. And we've adopted things like stormwater manuals, LID requirements, et cetera. So I am sensitive to some of the property owner concerns that aren't just for the R1 zone, but I think are especially acute in the R1 area because of the restrictions there. It doesn't mean that there's not merit for them. I think there's a lot of merit to protect those areas because they are an environmentally sensitive location. But there is a bit of a piling on effect that I think has some legitimacy to it. That's why staff are recommending a narrower focus, looking at maybe the net density rules are a good area to look at as a way of finding some balance that would not add tremendously to the actual yield at the end of the day. And it would also make a difference where the net density rules actually have that constraint. If you don't have those kinds of environmentally sensitive features on the property, well, that change won't make a difference to you. So those properties would remain unchanged after a consideration. So our thought is something like that might be easier than fiddling around with a lot of rezoning. Ben?
Cameron just articulated one important point, and this is, we need to be a little bit perhaps sympathetic for the property owner's needs. If they were in an unincorporated county with R1 zone, and if they were subject to King County's net density requirements, they would have more usable land than being in the city with R1 zone and our very restrictive net density requirements. And that's part of the struggles I think that they're going through it here. So maybe we need to take a look at our net density ordinance and see what flexibility that we can provide in the R1 zone area. So that's one tool that's available. Again, there's a number of ways to get there. What I encourage you to not to do that, open it citywide to look at the entire R1 zone. That really expands the scope of the project. And I know Cameron will be gone, but my community development director will probably kill me.
I wanted to, before we get to Don and then Nancy and then Kathy, we deferred the discussion on net density. My understanding is we made whether it was a hand or a nod or whatever, we didn't include it in our earlier decisions, but we agreed to defer it to the comprehensive plan, I believe. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct, and that's the reason why I've shown it up on the slide there. It is one of the elements that we said we'd look at as a part of the R1 study. We think there's still some merit. Some work has already been done on that, so we'll take advantage of the work done in 2013. And I think to get to maybe Councilmember Witten's concerns, we would have to analyze the effect on the environment associated with a change like that.
Right.
And so we're not relieved from that responsibility. That would be part of the city's process to undertake that work.
Well, just to extend my comment, I'm still very uncertain about that outcome, but I believe we made at least some kind of a commitment to at least consider it in the comprehensive plan. But Councilmember Jarrett, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of comments about, King County had a reason for setting it as R1 in the first place. And then we heard that, we're actually much stricter than R1 that King County set. Now, when did they do the R1 zoning? Do you know?
I think most of it happened in the East Sammamish Community Plan process, which, if memory serves, was kind of mid to late 90s, just before incorporation. I worked for King County up through 98 and watched some of that happen.
The reason I ask is because I moved up here in 1979, and the zoning was such that you could develop smaller than R1 lots at that time.
You heard some of from earlier, the county had a variety of zones that were ultimately discarded when the GMA came into place, and they went to more just basically urban or rural zones.
Right.
The sort of in-between zones that were suburban in character were abandoned. R1 is a holdover, in a sense, from that period, though, because it allows 1 acre density.
It is, because when we did our first comp plan, we had objection from FutureWise, the conservation, environmentally sensitive organization, that said we should not have anything lower than R4 in the urban area, because we're trying to protect the low density outside the urban growth boundary. So we successfully fended them off then, but it's a double-edged sword when you're trying to look at protecting the environment and maintaining higher densities inside the urban growth boundary. Now, what frustrates me here, or concerns me, is that we had some docket requests, and what we told those people is, well, we're not going to address those in the annual process. We're going to take it under consideration in the comp plan update. And now we're talking about possibly not doing that. And I don't think that's fair to those property owners. And then the other question I have is the question about, well, the city manager said, well, we don't want to do something citywide, and yet conversely, he said, well, you got to watch out for spot zoning. So the question I have for our council is just exactly what is spot zoning versus something like, for example, Mystic Lake, where we rezoned that area, or the county rezoned it. Is that spot zoning?
Spot zoning is the wrong term. Spot zoning is a specific term that deals with an isolated zoning act. We're not zoning here. We're doing comp plan amendments, and we are establishing area-wide zoning provision. So it's not a spot zoning issue. What it is, or could be, I should say, is a situation where the city is a policy matter as opposed to a specific zoning site, as quasi-judicial matter, deals in an inequitable manner. And there are provisions in the Growth Management Act that require us, you know as well as I do, Don, that require us to take a look at this from a full and fair perspective, adequate public participation, make sure we satisfy the goals of the act. So that's where that rather than spot zoning, more of an inequitable analysis would come in.
We're not really doing a zoning change in the comp plan, as you said.
But it's a similar...
It will eventually get implemented through a
similar
zoning
concern,
change.
right.
And so whether that's done as a follow-on action by the city or through individual rezone requests, there would be eventually an implementing action that would happen. But I think the legal counsel's point is the key one, which is to take a broad look at the area. And that's what we're, as staff, concerned about. If we just take, and I'll just pick on Mr. Timmerman since he's here, if we just take the Timmerman property in isolation and not look at the whole area around that, I think we run the danger of a perception problem, potential legal problem. So then if we're looking at the surrounding area, well, okay, well, how big is that then? And then all of a sudden we've got several hundred acres that we're looking at, and it becomes a relatively large study with a lot of property owners. And so if we're really looking at what I understand some of these property owners' goals are is, well, could we get a little more yield without sacrificing any environmental protection? There may be other mechanisms to get there, and that's what staff are observing, that it might be an easier way.
Councilmember Whitten.
If we picked one element, like the net density, and looking at whether we should increase that to 1.5 or full density, gross density. Gross density, if you have a 10-acre wetland and 2 acres of buildable and it's R1, you really don't want to just a gross density. I mean, that obviously would defeat, I think.
Yeah, and I can't see us recommending that happening.
So you don't want a gross density. It would have to be some kind of a modified thing. I would be very concerned if we picked that one element and did it so it would apply area-wide. I think it would be inconsistent with what we're trying to accomplish on steep slopes in the no disturbance area. I feel very strongly about that. I feel that you would need to look at how could you modify the stormwater requirements and the impervious surface limitations as two elements so that you have to offset any changes, the impacts of any changes, so that you're not increasing the impact to the environment. I mean, you can't look at just isolation and then where do you stop that? I mean, you know, do you increase the amount of open space and make the clustered lot smaller? So I can see some kind of a study. Maybe it should be done at a high level to begin with suggestions on how you could offset it so that you're not increasing any of the stormwater or obvious impacts from a area-wide change, but I'm really conservative here and cautious. You know, it's one thing to put more water into a wetland, it's another thing to put it down the slopes of Lake Sammamish. And that was the one where the people wanted to do R4 with small, minor impervious surface limitations, and just made me very uncomfortable about disturbing soil on that broad a basis. So
Okay.
I could be open to something here if it made sense in terms of offsetting all anticipated major impacts.
Okay, so some safeguards built in.
Okay, I would just comment that we're not making any decisions here tonight. We're just asking for the planning commission to look at a particular issue. And we're discussing outcomes is really kind of irrelevant because they're going to look at that and then it's going to come back to us.
That's true.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And whatever you do, to keep the scope relatively large enough, so comprehensive plan will have adopting zoning. When we adopt that plan, it will have a zoning attached to it. You have only 2 citizens made the request to look at that, generally speaking. And if you just do zoning for those 2 citizens and not look at the relatively larger area, you are within the boundaries of the spot zoning, not necessarily within the definition of it, but within the spirit of the spot zoning. That's why you need to keep it relatively large enough, but not to make it too wide, too large enough that we cannot manage the project.
Well, we've had some comments. I wonder if you could reiterate your recommendation, and we could perhaps give a head nod or a hand raise on that.
You know, I think it's fair to say that nobody on the council wants to see any greater environmental impacts associated with development on the R1 zone. We want to keep that to be any new development would be sensitive to the environment, stormwater, critical areas, et cetera. So if it's fair for staff to come up with a scope that would look at the array of techniques that now govern that and identify those areas where we might be able to entertain some flexibility that would respond to some of the landowner concerns without the loss of any environmental protection and bring those forward, it would seem to me that either the net density would be a good candidate for that. We could look at a couple of other things. And I'd like to work with Ben to see if we can look at some of the geography there and find a sweet spot for the area that we'd focus on. I think we're scheduled to bring back to you contract amendments in early May. That gives us a window of time to kind of work on this. And I think it would allow Ben to do some base touching with council members in between that once we've scoped this out a little bit further. Would that be a fair next step for council members?
Kind of reasonable approach, Council?
Yeah, in your understanding of the scope or your explanation of the scope, can we have a hand raised for that level of? Okay,
I'd rather leave it alone.
we're 4-1, so you're
5 is what I saw.
5-1. I'm sorry, can't count.
Advanced mouth.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay.
One more on the list here, Town Center. Your council direction was to undertake a holistic study. I heard a council member endorse that word. We have also heard some public comment saying that, kind of looking at all aspects of the town center plan, looking at affordable housing and other requirements. They add cost burden to the new development, review, maybe refine the incentives, reconsider some of the mandates, look at how the commercial square footage is distributed, maybe even looking at rezoning, adding some additional policy goals. That's a big list, and just even in the town center, you've got 70 property owners just in there to work with. So again, we're concerned that a large-scale study to revisit town center in a holistic fashion is going to take a lot of time and be somewhat costly. That's the largest item on the list, as you recall from your memo there, and there's some uncertainty as to exactly how much that'll cost. It'll be in the ballpark of $100,000 to do this, so not cheap. We would remind ourselves that the Economic Development Strategic Plan has already actually kind of pushed us along a certain pathway, and there are some next steps that we could build on following on the work that the City Council endorsed last year to review development regulations that govern the town center. So kind of within the current town center plan's policy bounds, are there some ways we could create some additional flexibility to kind of additionally prime the pump? Some landowners have also identified some of those changes. You've got stuff from Mr. Stickney and others. We'd suggest that the staff assemble and refine those list of changes, bring back to you kind of a recommended priority set, and we could bring that to the Community and Economic Development Committee at your next available time to have that committee bless that list, and that would help us refine the scope for the comp plan. So that would focus more on regulations, which is what we use on a daily basis to work with developers. So we see some real merit in that.
And I may add also, going with the handout is that we just received tonight from the public comment, what Cameron just described to you is actually consistent with what they would like to see is happening too, rather than undertaking another 2 years of study on the town center, but making some very surgical and strategic perhaps changes to the development regulations.
Okay, and just to give you a timeline, I think our next committee of the whole would be April 14th. So is that?
April 14th, I think that is roughly a month from now, so I think that's workable. I'm looking at Lyman to see if he's nodding his head. And
He's sort of nodding
because there's
his
a lot
head.
of peer pressure, he is nodding his head now. But we'll do our best to bring that material to April 14th. And I'll, before I go, I'll work with Lyman to put my 2 cents in.
Any other comments, Councilmember Whitten?
All of us.
I have some concerns about the town center in terms of the new stormwater regulations that will be coming out that may dramatically impact where we can put stormwater into wetlands and things, and may cause us to totally reconsider our town center, I understand. I'm wondering if this should be deferred until we have that review of the new stormwater regs that I know we anticipate in the next month or two.
And it's a very good point, Councilmember Whitten, that I think what Councilmember Whitten is talking about, the next wave of the National Pollution Discharge System Elimination Permit, what is called NPDES permit. And that permit is going to have perhaps more restrictive storm drainage regulations. But I don't want us to delay this work because the provisions of that permit is not going to be effective till 2017. And I think we can probably do some interim steps, and I think we owe it to the property owners to do that. But you're absolutely right. There's some provisions are coming in the pipeline. It's going to make things very challenging.
So I would suggest we do an adaptive management type of approach once we get those to see how it might work in with. In fact, we have, thank you, I hadn't realized we had a 2 or 3 year window. And also to how these other things we're looking at, we should be considering in light of those new requirements in case things don't get off the ground before then.
Thank you.
Councilmember John?
I just wanted to say that I was pleased with the handout we got relating to the orbits, although I did miss the asteroid belt.
Well, this comment is coming from somebody with in the PhD from the aeronautical engineering.
Astronomy. But I like the comments that Cameron said about assembling and refining a list of changes and coming back to us. So I support that.
Councilmember Valderrama?
Yeah, I'm very supportive of the questions that were being asked earlier in public comment and that Cameron's been alluding to. However, that said, I go back to what Councilmember Whitten has said, that if the NPDES discharge emission standards are so draconian as we have been told before and we've been fighting it, do we want to invest this kind of effort when we're going to be rethinking it? And 2 to 3 years will be here very quickly. So I would give pause to everyone to consider that very closely if we want to invest a lot of effort when we may have to rethink everything. But the general questions that were being asked, I think, are useful overall for the city and the council. And frankly, I'm concerned and surprised that they weren't part of the original consultant study.
Any other thoughts? Councilmember Huckabee, or Deputy Mayor Huckabee?
Yes, I'd like to second what Councilmember Whitten said. I do think that NPDES, when those regulations come down, I was concerned about that in reviewing the R1 as well as the town center. But I do think that we have a window of opportunity, and I would like to look at some of these. So I would very much favor getting some suggested changes on this town center. So hopefully we can get some of it going forward without having to wait many more years into the future.
Thank you.
Okay.
Nancy.
One more time.
Just real quick, on the affordable housing, one of the things that, having sat through this for the last 10 years and the development of the plan, it became very clear from every report we had that affordable housing does not happen unless it's a mandate. So if we're going to include reducing that requirement, I think we need to look at having at least a portion of it be a mandate, not just all incentives, to accomplish the goals.
Okay,
So I think that needs to be taken into account. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, quick one.
Just a quick comment. I disagree with that last statement because I have seen affordable housing implemented by incentive, and it happened in Bellevue, so I have a case in point. So let's not make blank statements that cover all situations.
All right, our community development director has offered an approach to this. I'd like to get hands in approving that approach. I think we're good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, and I think, don't need to go through the rest of these. You've answered all the questions.
questions.
So thank you very much. Yeah.
All right. Next will be an executive session with on land acquisition pursuant to RCW 4230-110, 1B, after which we are likely to have an action. However, before we go into that, I would like to take 5 to 10 minutes so people can take a biological
Mayor,
break.
I also think the executive session could fairly fall under potential litigation as well.
As well as potential litigation. Thank you.
Estimate of time, did he give an estimate of time?
Okay. Everybody in the room?
I'll tell you.
The Sammamish City Council is back in session after the executive session, and we do have a motion to make. Do I have the motion? Councilmember
I have it.
Valderrama?
Yes, I move to authorize the city manager to execute one or more easements as part of the Sammamish Community and Aquatic Center project that provides as follows. Preserve the project area planned for forestation in a drainage easement as part of the project's stormwater's best management practices, and preserve approximately 2.5 to 3 acres of currently forested land located west of the project in a conservation easement to be maintained as forested open space with the ability of the city to authorize additional compatible uses such as public trails and drainage maintenances.
I would second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Anything further from anyone? I think we've all had a chance to talk. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.